What's up guys, I'm here outside final table for a 50K guaranteed tournament, 200 buy-in. First prize should be somewhere between 15K and 20K. Very cool because sure used that. So let's go in there and hopefully let's run good and let's make a deep run. I'll see you inside. I take my seat at the table and immediately pick up a playable hand, ace-10 offsuit in the cutoff. There's a limp from the low jack, I raise it up to 400 and I get called by the button and the low jack. We go three ways to the flop, which comes 10-7 deuce 2 diamonds. Low jack checks, I continue for 800 and only the button makes the call. Heads up to the turn, which comes the 8 of clubs. This card does bring in a possible straight, but I can still get value from flush draws, worse tens, etc. So I fire again for 2200 and the button clicks it back to 5000. I'm not going anywhere just yet with top pair top kicker, so I make the call. The river is the 8 of diamonds, completing the flush and pairing the board. I check and the button checks back. With the jack 9 offsuit for a turn straight, I lose almost a third of my stack on the first hand, not the start I was hoping for. A few moments later, I pick up king queen offsuit in the low jack. There's a call from middle position, I raise to 500, and I get called by the cutoff and the middle position player. We go three ways to a flop of ace queen 4 rainbow. Middle position checks. This is a good board for my range and I flop a decent second pair, but I don't think I'm getting called by worse very often, so I decide to check and the cutoff checks as well. The turn is the 3 of clubs. Middle position leads for 300, which is a very weird small bet. I call and the cutoff calls. The river comes the 10 of clubs, completing a ton of draws. Action checks around and the middle position player is going to take it down with ace 7 offsuit. Next level, I pick up pocket 6s in middle position and open the action to 600. I get called by the small and big blind. We go three ways to the flop, which comes jack 9 ace. Both blanks check. Again, good board from my range, but with no real chance to improve on the turn unless I hit a 6 specifically, I decide to check back. The turn is the 3 of spades. Small blind leads for 500 and the big blind calls. I think about peeling the river because I'm holding the 6 of hearts, so if a 6 comes, I know it will be a clean out and it will also look like a break to my opponent, so I have some decent implied odds. For those reasons, I make the call. The river comes the 8 of hearts, completing a ton of draws. When the small blind checks, I'm thinking if the big blind checks as well, I'm going to take a stab at this pot, but I don't get the chance as the big blind bets 2000 and both myself and the small blind make the fold. In this one, there's a couple of limps in late position before I look down at ace 7 suited on the button. Let's have some fun with a suited connector. I bump it up to 800 and the low jack is the only player to make the call. We go heads up to a flop of 8-5-6 rainbow, giving me top pair, an open-ended straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw. When the low jack checks to me, I fire out a small bet of 600. That's too much for them, and they make the fold. In this hand, there's an open from under the gun to 600, folds around to me in the small blind, and I look down at pocket queens. I 3-bet to 2000, big blind folds, and unfortunately under the gun folds as well. Here I pick up pocket 10s under the gun and open the action to 1000. Action folds around to the big blind who defends, and we go heads up to a flop of deuce jack 7 2 hearts. The big blind checks to me. With only one overcard to my 10s and plenty of draws available, I c-bet for 1000 and the big blind makes the call. The turn comes another jack and the big blind checks again. A second jack is good for me as it doesn't add another overcard to my 10s and it makes it a little bit less likely that my opponent has a jack. I can still get value from worse pairs and draws. I bet 2500 and the big blind makes the fold. In this one, there's a limp from the low jack before I look down at pocket kings in the hijack. I raise to 1500, small blind cold calls, and the low jack limper folds. We go heads up to a flop of 10-8-10 rainbow. Small blind checks to me, and on this board I could go either way between checking and betting. I don't get value from much, but my hand could use a little protection, so I fire a c-bet of 2000 and the small blind folds. In this hand, I pick up queen jack suited under the gun. I open the action to 1200. Action folds to the hijack who calls, button calls as well, and the blinds fold. We go three ways to a flop of 8-5-7 2 spades. Really not much for me to go on here. I check, the hijack leads for 2700, and both the button and myself make the fold. In this one, the hijack, cutoff, button, and small blind limp before I look down at king 7 offsuit in the big blind. I check my option, and we go 5 ways to a flop of jack king 7 2 hearts. Small blind checks, and with 2 pair on this very connected board, I don't want to risk this checking around. I lead for 1600, the hijack folds, the cutoff raises to 4600, button at small blind, get out of the way, and action is back on me. This is an interesting spot for me because I just saw this player play flop trips this way, so I'm assuming they're raising for value, but the only hand I realistically lose to here is king jack. They don't have kings or jacks since it's just called pre-flop. It's hard for them to have 7s with the 7 in my hand. So yeah, looks to me like I'm either against king jack or a flush draw, maybe even a straight and flush draw. I debate between calling and shoving, and even though I don't think my opponent is straight up bluffing or value cutting themselves with a single pair too often, I suppose I do want to keep those hands in, so I end up just calling. Just hoping for a safe turn to get the rest of the chips in, and it comes to 6 of diamonds. I still think leading after calling a raise looks way too strong, so I check, and my opponent bets 10,000. I've only got 1,000 or so more behind, so I go all in, and they call. We flip our cards over, and I am surprised to see them turn over king 5 of clubs. They are drawing dead. The river is an inconsequential 3 of diamonds. I win a massive pot, and for the first time in this tournament, I'm above starting stack. Let's go. Here, there's a limp from under the gun. Action folds to me, and I look down at ace-10 offsuit in the hijack. I raise to 1200, and under the gun makes the call. I've noticed this player seems to be limping and calling raises pre-flop a lot, and play pretty straightforward post-flop. They also like to check in the dark, so when the flop comes 7-6 queen rainbow, I see bet for 1000, and they fold. A few hands later, same player limps from the low jack, action folds to me in the button, and I peel ace-3 suited. I raise it up to 2000, they make the call. They check dark, the flop comes 8-6-6, I see bet for 3200, and they fold. In this hand, I pick up ace-king offsuit in the low jack and open the action to 1200. Both the small blind and the big blind make the call. We go 3 ways to a flop of queen 4-9 rainbow. Both blinds checks to me. I think this board is disconnected enough that I can take this hand down with a c-bet. I fire for 2000, and only the small blind makes the call. We go heads up to the turn, which comes to king of hearts, giving me top pair, top kicker. There are hands that beat me, like jack 10, king queen, king 9 suited. Maybe I was already losing to queen 9 suited or pocket 9s on the flop already, but this board is a little too connected to check and give my opponent a free card. I bet 5500. The small blind tanks for about 30 seconds before making the call. When they just call, I think they probably have a queen, maybe a queen with a flush or a straight draw. When the river comes a pretty safe looking 7 of spades and the small blind checks for a 3rd time, I'm going to put them all in for their remaining 11,000. Once again, they tank for about 30 seconds before folding. I pick up another nice pot, and it's time for first break. All right, we're on first break. It's been a very interesting few levels, starting on the downswing and then turned things around with that 2 pair king 7, and then I think I got fortunate with that ace king hand versus what was probably the queen, so that turned out very well. So I ended up with about a double average stack, if the numbers are correct, about 42k. I'm going to take the $100 20k add-on. Let's hope things keep going well. Let's run up a stack. I'll see you guys inside. Alright, back in the action in this one. There are limps from under the gun 1, hijack, button, and small blind before I look down at king 7 in the big blind. Let's see if I can score another big blind special. I check my option. We go 6 ways to a flop of 9 jack 7 rainbow, and action checks around. The turn is the 7 of hearts, giving me trips and putting a 2nd heart on the board. Small blind checks to me. I bet 1500, and the hijack is the only player to make the call. The river comes, the 9 of clubs. I'm not sure I get value from much at this point, so I decide to check. I'm happy to see the hijack check back. Trip 7s is good, and I take the pot down. In this hand, action folds to the hijack who limps. I look down at jack 9 suited in the cutoff, and let's mix things up a little bit here. I raise to 2000. The hijack is the only player to make the call. We go heads up to a flop of queen 6-10 2 diamonds, and the hijack checks to me. With an open-ended straight draw, a backdoor flush draw, and jack high, I bet 2500, and the hijack folds. In this one, there's an open to 3000 from under the gun. Under the 1 calls, folds to me in the cutoff, and I look down at ace king. I raise it up to 12,000, and under the gun 1 is the only player to make the call. We go heads up to a flop of 8, 10, 9 rainbow, and once again this opponent decides to check in the dark. On this super connected board, I decide to check back and see how things develop. The turn comes the jack of spades. When under the gun 1 checks for a second time, I think it's time for me to try and take this pot down. I can easily represent the straight with ace queen or pocket queens. I fire a bet of 15,000 and my opponent pretty quickly folds. I win a very nice spot, and slowly but surely I'm building a very nice stack in this tournament. A couple of levels go by before I pick up ace queen in the low jack and action folds to me. I open to 4,000 and the big blind is the only player to make the call. We go heads up to a flop of 9, 10, 6 rainbow. Big blind checks to me, and on this one I'm going to check it back. The turn comes another 6, putting a second diamond, and this time the big blind leads for a min bet of 1,600. For that price I can't do much but call. The river comes a jack, and once again my opponent fires a min bet of 1,600. As played, I think my opponent's most likely holding is a 10, maybe a 9. Both of these hands beat ace high, so I'm going to raise to 4,200. My opponent goes into the tank for a few moments before folding. Nice to get this one through, and another pot coming my way into the second break.
Alright, we're on second break. I'm sitting on about 92k, average stack is 63k, and we'll be coming back to 1,000, 2,000 blinds. So we're sitting on a good stack, but things can move pretty quickly. There's going to be a lot of all-ins. You're going to see a lot of shoving with 25-minute levels. Alright, let's get back in there and let's keep running good.
Okay, first hand I get involved in after the break, there's an open to 5,000 from middle position. The hijack makes the call, and I look down at pocket 8s in the big blind. I'm going to just call and set mine. The flop comes 4-8 deuce, giving me top set. Let's go. I check and flow to the middle position player, who continues for 8,000. Hijack gets out of the way, and I'm just going to smooth call here. Heads up to the turn, which comes a jack, putting a second spade on the board. I check for a second time, and my opponent continues for 15,000. I debate between calling and raising. I think my opponent most likely has an overpair, so I think my best chance of winning all the chips is to just call and let my opponent blast off on the brick river. The river is not quite the break I was looking for. It's the 7 of spades, completing the backdoor flush. It does complete the straight with 10-9, but I'm not too worried about that. I decide to go with a conservative check, and my opponent pretty quickly checks back, so I know I missed on some value. I show my set and it's good. Still, another very nice pot coming my way. In this one, action folds to me in the cutoff. I pick up 9-8 suited, I open to 5,000, and everybody folds. Here, action once again folds to me in the small blind, and I peel ace-10 off. I open to 6,000, and the big blind folds. Nice to pick up chips, as the blinds are about to double up soon. Here, there's a limp from middle position before I look down at ace-jack offsuit in the cutoff. I raise it up to 7,000. Big blind makes the call, and the middle position player folds. Going heads up to a flop with this player once again, and it comes deuce, 10, ace, 2 hearts. My opponent does not check dark this time, but they still check. I see bet for 10,000, and they make the call. The turn comes to 8 of clubs, and the big blind checks for a second time. When they check twice, I'm excluding 2-pair hands like ace-10 and ace-8 from their range. There's 39,000 in the middle, and my opponent has 37,000 behind, so I decide to put them all in. They go in the tank for a full minute before calling, and they show king-queen of hearts for the nut flush draw, nut straight draw, and yes, the royal flush draw. I have a bunch of outs to dodge going to this river, which comes the queen of clubs, and I'm going to score my first knockout of the tournament and a massive pot. I now have close to 100 big blinds in my stack. Well, as I mentioned a couple of hands before, the blinds have now doubled, so I don't have a 100 big blind stack anymore, but closer to 45. Still, around double the average stack at this stage of the tournament. Lots of players sitting on 10, 20, 30 big blind stacks, so there's going to be a lot of shoving. In this hand, the low jack to my right goes all in for 21,000, roughly 5 big blinds before I look down at pocket queens in the cutoff. Typically, I would simply ISO raise here, but because there's a few shallow stacks to act behind me, I think a tricky play would be to just call and induce a player to reshove behind with a weaker hand and trap them. I set the plan in motion by just calling, and things go according to plan, sort of. The button to my left 3 bets to 60,000. Problem is, they're not all in. they actually have a very similar stack to mine. Action folds back to me, and I don't know what to do. This player just joined the table. There was no showdown, but they played their first hand at the table very aggressively, and now this is their second hand. I think all options are viable. I could fold. I only have 21k invested in this spot, so it would be a minor dent to my stack. I could just call and see how things develop. If I were to fold post-flop, I would still have 30 bigs to play with. Or I could raise all in, although I do have to wonder how often my opponent is doing this with jacks, tens, or anything worse than ace-king. I've been disciplined and grinding all tournament long, picking up small pots here and there. I'm probably in the top 10 or 20 stacks in the room, so do I really want to risk it all here? I am really close to folding, but ultimately I decided my hand is just too good here, so I 4-bet all in, and the button pretty much snap calls. They obviously have aces, and the low jack shows pocket eights. It's funny, because if I had shoved pre-flop, it would just be a cooler, right? But by playing it tricky, I actually gave myself the opportunity to make a difficult but reasonable fold, only to squander it away and call because it's pocket queens. So here we are. This is a massive, massive pot. Whoever wins this is going to chip lead the tournament. Let's go to the run out. Well, if the pre-flop action didn't have me vomiting, this run out certainly does. I somehow find a 2-outer on the flop, only for my opponent to find another 2-outer on the turn. I am absolutely devastated. Dieter counts out our chip stacks, and we did end up having very similar stacks. I had my opponent covered by 1,000. One single yellow chip. The literal and figurative chip and a chair. I'm not even sure I want to come back, to be honest. I feel more like curling up in a corner and crying, but hey, looks like I still have some poker to play, and play some poker I shall. The very next shuffle, I get dealt king jack off, and action folds to me. I call a quarter of the big blind, which puts me all in. I'm happy to see action fold to the blinds. Small blind completes, big blind checks their option. We go 3 ways to a flop of 7 ace queen 2 spades, and both blinds check. Any tens about? Bink! The turn is the 10 of clubs, giving me the nut straight. Looks like I'm going to be hanging around a little longer. Both blinds check, and the river comes the 8 of spades. Uh-oh. But both blinds check again, so we go to showdown, and I have the winner, and I increase my stack by 700%. Let's go! The following shuffle, I pick up ace-4 suited and under the gun. I open shove for 7,000, and the low jack 3-bet shoves, and they have me covered. Rest of the table folds, and I'm up against jack 10 suited. The flop comes 9 deuce 4. I pair up my 4, but I still need to dodge a jack or a 10. The turn is the 7 of hearts, giving me the nut flush draw, and my opponent a gut shot straight draw. I need to dodge a non-heart jack 10 or 8. 3 of hearts on the river, I make the nut flush, and now I have 6 big blinds in my stack. Celebration is short-lived though, as the very next hand I'm in the big blind, and with the big blind ante, I got a third of my stack in the middle already. The cutoff open shoves, and I look down at 9-6 suited, big lick. I've lost count of how many tournaments I've busted against this specific hand for some reason. I'm thinking I can do it too. So I call, and I'm up against king jack offsuit. At least I'm live until the flop comes jack 8-3 rainbow. It's looking pretty grim for me. Turn is another 3 and it's over. River is a deuce, and I am out in 67th place.
All right, so there you have it. I didn't have the heart to record a video after I busted because I was just like so disappointed. Really annoying to grind and build up a stack only to have it almost all gone on the single hand, queens versus aces. I discussed this hand with a fellow vlogger that I met that day, Will. Shout out to Will. Go check out his channel. He's got amazing content, and for him, it was a automatic all-in. I'm still on the fence about it. I think I could have probably found an exploit fold, especially with the way the pre-flop action went. But, you know, that's tournament poker. A few incredible highs and a lot of disappointing and crushing lows. But
the thrill of that first place is what always keeps us coming back. I did play a cash game session after this tournament, which I will put out in the next vlog. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, drop me a comment, and don't hesitate to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't already. In the meantime, good luck at the tables, and I'll catch you in the next one.